to serving your success. I am Dr. Andrea Goeglein, and with me, of course, is Kate Kellogg.
Hi, everybody.
Kate is actually going to lead the conversation today. As you know, we talk positive psychology, we talk work, we talk millennials, and we talk a lot about a lot of other things. But Kate came to me a day ago and she said, how about this week's show be about the impact of travel on, and I said, tell me more, and she did. So that's all I'm going to say at this moment. I will be chiming in with science and the impact and all those other things, but it's all yours.
Oh, well, thank you. So last week I know we touched a lot on self-love and what that all entails, and Mackenzie had some really great points.
Right, that's Mackenzie White.
Mackenzie White,
yes.
Absolutely. She was a wonderful guest last week, and we talked a lot about self-love and all of the details and where we can find self-love. And for me, and for what I think a lot of millennials are finding, is that travel is the key to that, and finding out, like, who am I? And people are like, well, can't know where you're going until you know where you've been, so you start here at home. And then I think after a while you go, I think it's time to leave. And
I've been here
that
long
wanderlust.
enough.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
And I was actually reading a statistic by Forbes this morning, and because I just typed in, like millennials and traveling. Whoosh! Google was like, please read me. I have all these stats because guess what? You social media addicted, fast food loving generation, you actually love to travel.
Absolutely.
And Forbes said, according to Top Deck Travel, out of 31,000 millennials, 88% of them had traveled overseas in the last year.
Oh, that's remarkable. That is so different than my generation.
How crazy is that?
So different. I was probably... those growing up in the 60s, they became the adventurers, but they were traveling around the United States, and yes, they started to travel outside, and of course it was affordability. There was airplane trips took a long time, and so there a lot of things have changed, but what I'm noticing, and I think it speaks to many of the things that we've said about work, at one point in our conversation last week, there was the conversation that the comment that you made that millennials are having a hard time finding jobs, and I made the not so snide, I think it's known as snarky. The snarky comment. That is not as though it's that hard to find a job. You just don't want the jobs we have.
Right.
And one of the aspects of jobs, meaning employment, paychecks, benefits, is that you get only X amount of days that you get to travel. And your generation is much looser. The boundaries around that need to be looser. It is very clear the boundaries around that need to be looser.
Absolutely. I think because millennials are having, a majority of millennials can have a hard time finding a job. So what I think has in turn happened is a lot of freelancing. So, and there's also the rise of like graphic design and the internet that allows you to, one, leave and do your work from wherever. I mean, I do some graphic design on the side. I do some social media on the side. All of these career avenues
that's known as your side hustle.
Side hustle, yes.
Your side hustle.
Hey, check it out. I wasn't sure if I should throw that in there or not, but you just went ahead and did it. Yeah, essentially, it's my side hustle. And so if that were my full-time job, what's to stop me from doing that while backpacking across Europe? And I think that's something that the millennials have absolutely taken to.
And I will say that my generation definitely stepped into it, but they stepped into it after a degree of financial stability.
Well, and that made sense for the time.
And we do have to have a separate conversation about how hard it is for you to find work in a 5% unemployment economy. I mean, because I do think there's many levels to that conversation. And one of them clearly for me is the degree of freedom that you're requiring, the same way that you come into the workforce wanting that purpose to be attached, that you just don't want mindless work. You have to think that what you're doing actually is impacting something. Okay? So you add that to the boundaries of what it means to show up. Whereas my generation and corporations in particular had used freelancing, actually in somewhat of a negative way. It was a way to get you not to have benefits. It was a way after job reductions to still have the talent of all of those people with years of experience. Then the next generation, and I had noticed this in the 90s when the term U Inc. There were corporations where you would go into a training, a workshop, and you were being taught that now you have to be U Inc. And I, as a psychologist and a trained in industrial psychology, said, you tell me that I'm me Inc. long enough, I'm not going to need you Inc.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I do believe that has occurred.
Right.
And that's why people step in and out of careers, why it appears that there's job hopping.
Right.
But within that job hopping, whereas someone who got laid off at 40 or at 50 years old would say, I'm going to take a month and travel with my family.
Right.
You're doing that in between opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's this, again, it goes back to the whole millennial stance of, let's focus on ourselves first. Let's, graduate college. Let's, minimize our debt. And then we can get married and then we can have kids, because there is a sense of, stabilization within yourself.
Right.
And then you can go on to create stabilization within a future family or career goals. And so millennials are doing that through travel. And I think I can speak to this because I studied abroad in Rome for 6 months.
Okay.
And that, oh man, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, because I'd actually never traveled outside of the United States.
Was that part of your school program?
It was. So thankfully, I was very blessed in that I had done all my research, because since I was a little girl, I was like, Mom, Dad, I know what this study abroad thing is. They've talked about it in school.
I like this part.
I am going. And they were like, okay, yes, absolutely. You need to go see the world, Kaitlin, because we never got that chance, and we think that'd be great for you. So, my junior year of college, I was like, okay, here we go. And St. Mary's College of California made it very easy for me to transfer everything over. They're a sister school. So I went to John Cabot University, which is in the heart of Rome. So here is the Vatican. And then probably about 10 blocks this way was my school. And then I lived probably 4 blocks away from that.
Wow.
So I was pretty much in prime
go
real
back
estate.
to school.
Yeah, right. I think about that all the time, especially when they're posting pictures on Facebook and they're like, we miss you at John Cabot. I'm like, yeah, I miss you too.
That's right. Do you need any social media on the side?
Right? I'm your girl. And so what for me, that it taught me so much in those 6 months. Like
so stop for a moment. What did it teach you?
So first, I think it's important to talk about the self-awareness that I gained, and the self-confidence that traveling, by myself as like a 21-year-old woman in a foreign country it's invaluable. And I don't think I realized, the value behind that. Right. But I had never traveled outside the country before. So this was my first time going on a plane that lasted longer than like an hour.
Yeah, I was already working. Actually, I was already working. I had been married and already divorced. Okay. But I was still only 21 years old.
Right.
Before.
Where were you going?
I was going to England, and my boss, who was English, said to me that I was best served. I take that back. I did go to Mexico, and that is supposed to count.
Right.
But we were on the same continent. But she said to me, go to England. If you've never traveled outside the United States, go to where you understand the language.
Right.
So I think in essence she was saying you don't become an ugly American.
Which,
but you know what? It was great advice because it was such an incredible experience. The history there was the thousands of years that the United States did not have. Right. And yet it was my language, so it was.
It made it for
experience.
a seamless transition almost, and that was something I did not think through. I was like, oh, you know what? Italy sounds
So
great.
did you take Italian in school?
Nope. Oh, not a lick of Italian. I was just like, go ahead, drop me off. I don't care.
And what were you studying in this school?
It was just a continuation of my
your
degree.
Classes. Okay, so it was in English. You were taught in English.
Yes, it was in English.
When my daughter went,
school.
she was in Spanish, and she went to Spain. and everything was
which is
yes,
incredible
yes, yes.
because that immersion is priceless, and I'm
Right.
sure she speaks Spanish fluently.
Not so much, but that's okay.
Well, at the time,
Enough.
when she
That's
came
exactly
back.
right. She writes it beautifully.
Oh, perfect. Well,
yeah,
as
which
long
I
as there's
think
some skill
we'll
set.
tend to have it. Yes.
But no, they picked me up from the airport, John Cabot University, and they drove me back to my apartment, and they were like, "Ciao, Bella," and I was like,
Oh, ciao bella.
yeah, I was like, "Oh yeah," and then
Is that an ice cream? Is that a
No,
gelato?
what is that? And so I'm like moving my stuff up to my 6th floor apartment, and there was no elevator, so that was like hauling all of my life's belongings up the stairs, and there were like marble staircases too, and it had been raining,
great.
so I'm like,
Yes.
please don't slip and fall and break your
Yep.
leg on your first day in the foreign country, so mom and dad don't freak out, like, hello, mama,
Yeah.
bad news. But no, it was incredible because suddenly I had no Wi-Fi. I didn't have an oven.
yeah.
All I had was a stovetop. There was no microwave, nothing. So it was like
Okay.
I had been completely taken out of my element
Yep.
and thrown into an entirely different world. And I will argue that Rome is one of the last few authentic places in Europe that has not been Americanized, because the Italians have just held on, or the Romans, I should say,
Yes.
have held on to the Italian language. And so when I went out into into the city, they were like, "You speak Italian."
That's right.
And so I was like, I better learn this real quick.
I speak American Express.
I
I never had a language barrier.
And so it was really incredible for me because I'm, learning how to navigate this foreign country, learning how to speak the language. I don't have like a translator. There's no Wi-Fi.
Right.
So it was something for me that was so pure. It was like, wow, because there is that moment whenever you're traveling where you're like, I'm lost, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, and I'm
Yes.
scared, and I'm by myself, and then you have to go, okay, you have to figure this out.
So what was that? What was the moment of bravery or courage? Like, when did you realize that you had made this decision?
Right.
And there were lots of things you didn't consider.
I think it was when I was flying to Poland.
Oh,
Yes, I was going, it was actually about this time,
Okay.
probably about 4 years ago, and I was going to Auschwitz concentration camp
Okay.
because I had ancestors who had passed away in the camp, and so I felt it was a part of my family's journey to go back and sort of pay homage and to the lives, because
Sure,
it was
absolutely.
a very powerful experience. And so in light of getting there, it was sort of a traumatizing experience. So we take off. This is my
Did you
first
take
time.
a Polish airline?
No, I took Ryanair, which it's like the Spirit Airlines of Europe. So that was like mistake number one.
Yes.
But as a college student, you're
Cheapest ticket.
you're doing what you can to
That's
get there.
exactly
It was like
right.
€60 round trip. So that I was like, oh, this is
It was
great.
a deal.
And so I was going from Rome to Krakow. And so halfway through the flight, they come on in Polish and they sound panicked. And I'm like, oh God, I don't speak Polish. This is not good. This is not good at all. And so then all of a sudden the plane just starts going like this, like it's descending. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, where are we going? And then all of a sudden we land in the middle of the tarmac. And it is dumping snow. And me, not thinking things through, my coat's in, my checked bag. And so I
good.
have like this thin little shirt on, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe they have like the little like car that comes by and picks you up. They're like, mm-mm. And so everyone's like panicked and screaming in Polish, and I'm like, I don't know, okay, I'll just follow the crowd. And so now I'm walking like 300 yards to the airport, and like the snow's just coming down, and I'm like, oh my God, how did I get here? And I'm like, okay, well, where are we, first of all? And we had landed in Warsaw because the snow was so bad they couldn't continue on to Krakow. And I'm frantically going around like,
okay, so you were diverted.
so who speaks English? And everyone's like, I don't speak English. And so I'm like, oh my God. And I had this like mental breakdown, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. No one speaks my language. Like, none of the restaurants are
So
open.
you are no longer the universe.
I am no longer the universe. And it was also that earth-shattering American experience where you're like, wow, the world does not revolve around me and my country and my language. And it's part of what makes America wonderful, but it also makes it a little,
Well,
earth-shattering.
and I think that speaks to the awareness and perspective stuff,
Right.
that travel has a benefit for young people in particular,
Absolutely.
very different than when we're planning vacations now. It is that ability to know that you can make it on your own,
Right.
that the world is dramatically different than these little bubbles
Right.
that you were brought up in. It's clear to me the benefit, and for me, things like the internet
Right.
gave exposure. I think it seeded the curiosity differently.
Absolutely.
Whereas everything else in the decades before, it was a slower process to get information, how long it would take, all of those things. Having the ready available information of what it could look like tempts you to want to try.
Right. Absolutely. And the funny thing is I just followed the crowd and, trusted in myself, like wherever I wind up, I'm going to be okay. And I actually wound up hopping on this bus that everybody was just getting on. And it was a 3-hour bus ride. And now it's like 2:00 in the morning through the back countryside of Poland.
I don't have this gene. I just don't have this gene.
And we arrive in Krakow. So it's now like 3:30 in the morning. And like, I get into the train station. No trains working, right? Because,
it's 3:00 in the morning.
Why would they be running? So I hop into this taxi cab, and this guy gets out, and it's a Mercedes. Like, it's a very nice
Which
car.
is a
So I'm
typical
like,
car.
okay,
for
like,
Europe.
I feel somewhat safe. And then the guy just takes off. He's going like 120 miles an hour. We're swerving like this across the freeway.
And
I was
you
like,
can't communicate.
and he's trying to speak English to me, but it was basically like the equivalent of like, hi, dog, cat,
Yes.
meow. And I was like,
That would be my Polish. So
yeah.
I can't even get that far.
And he's smiling and he's trying to be so nice. And I'm just like, dude, you're driving way too fast and I'm way too new to this. Like, slow down. And so then like, I'm like, this is how I die. Like, this is gonna be it. And then he pulls up and like swerves in like James Bond style in front of what looks like a jail. And I'm like, oh, please don't tell me this is my hostel. And for the record, it was called Hostel Mosquito.
Oh, and you actually booked a room there?
It was the only one open that weekend. And so I go into this jail-like structure. And I actually walked into a very nice, warm, welcoming hostel. And this, girl who's about my age greets me. And she speaks some English. She's like, hi, like, room key, down the block, orange door. And I was like, what? Down the block? I was like, what do you mean I have to go down the block? She goes, down the block. Like, you have to walk there to find your room. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So here I am. Now it's like 4:00 in the morning. I have my little bag. I'm like walking through the streets of Krakow, Poland. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know where I am. And there was that sobering moment of like, this is actually very dangerous. And we are never going to tell Mom about this. Because Mom
I've heard a lot
attack.
of those stories.
But it was down the block, but it was not an orange door. She had, didn't have the color right, and it was actually just like a blue door. And so it was just like, after a while, I was like, I'm just going to go down the row and try all the keys and then see what happens. And
see, already, I may write the book about Brave, Don't Die Waiting to Be Brave. The truth is, if bravery was measured by that, I would not be here today writing those books.
You know what? I found it. I got into the room. I woke up the next morning. I got on the bus to Auschwitz, and all was okay. But it was once it all settled down, I was like, wow, if I can do that, I can get through just about damn anything.
And that's what travel will do. It stretches you. When you get on the same buses and you get on the same trains every day, or get in your car, the pattern, your brain doesn't need to expand unless someone cuts you off. There's small things, but all of it's within pattern. When you're required to be in situations like that where one thing just unfolds, who predicted the snowstorm, who predicted landing in one place, all of those things unfold. At the end of it, it can be incredibly terrifying.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay? And it also allows you at the end of it to say, oh, wait, I just did that. And it's not the fear that you're left with, but you're left with the ability that I just did something that, was very different.
And that's, I think, such a key to success. To have that resilience, to have that self-awareness. And, it just, to actually end that little story, I was at Auschwitz. I'm about to walk through the gates. It's very reverent. Everybody's solemn and being respectful. And I hear from what sounds like 25 yards away, Kaitlin Kellogg, is that you? And I was like,
No.
Oh my God. Oh, this is not happening. Because now everybody's turning to me like, you disrespectful American. And I'm just like, oh my God. And up comes running one of my classmates from St. Mary's.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, it's Tuesday at the end of February, and we're at Auschwitz concentration camp.
Right.
What the heck are you doing here, Zach?
Definitely a random.
Yeah, it was one of those moments, and he was like, I'm studying abroad in Germany, and I decided to come visit this weekend, and I'm just so happy to see you here. And it was like the biggest embrace, because it was just like something so beautiful in such a moment of such sadness and kind of confusion and chaos. It was just like, wow. And there was this awe and gratitude.
Was it better then to have someone, did you then experience Auschwitz with him?
We did parts of it. So I did Auschwitz 1 with him, and then I went on to Auschwitz 2 Birkenau by myself.
Okay.
Because that is truly hell on earth.
Because that is one of the things that I've noticed. I do like to walk cities by myself. I really, and because of my cell phone, I feel very connected. I'm taking pictures of things and sending them to people. I don't actually feel like I'm alone when I'm doing things. But there are certain emotional experiences where you do want to have someone there to just to process what are they aware of differently than what I'm aware of. But that is what travel. So let me pause a moment and give you some of the science and the history and all of this good stuff. At first when Kate mentioned about travel, I wasn't quite sure, and she may have caught me at a weak moment because silly me, I am the girl who wrote Don't Die with Vacation Time on the books, the very first one, which you can get for free on my website. So just know that was actually a true story of a client and I's conversation where she called me and she said, Andrea, you have to make me a promise that we will not die with Vacation Time on the books. And the whole essence of that comment came from the fact that she was a business owner, and for the second time in 6 months, she had paid into the estate of a long-term employee their vacation pay. Well, that's something I don't perceive millennials will be doing.
Right.
But it was at the advent of research coming out that was on one on top of another. When you go through the recession of the early 90s, you then go through a 10-year boom, we then enter a war, we then go into a massive recession, and in many communities a depression in the United States. You were being required to work that much more and not think about the time you should be taking. And it was at that point that the best research started showing up saying, you will think better, you will work better, you will be less sick, you will take less antidepressants. One study after another. And if you are interested, I have one article in particular that literally lists 5 or 6 different research studies. If you write me at drsuccess@servingsuccess.com, I'll send you over the link. It is not something that I did. It is one that I use. And it lists all the great research studies that show why vacation and taking time, throughout your career is a very important thing.
Absolutely.
And it's one thing that, you were on a scholarship to a school, those trips, but they're not luxurious trips.
No.
I've heard many a disaster story about the housing conditions where you're living. It is an incredible opportunity that many don't have, but it is not a high ticket item.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think your generation has offered. Is ways. I mean, it wasn't 50-year-olds who developed Airbnb.
No, absolutely not.
And all of the Ubers of the world, the things that are allowing you to be more mobile and not be committed for any long-term period of time. That whole connection there really is speaking to how will work be structured for us.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, even when I was in Rome and, there was a point where my water heater had broken, the Wi-Fi went out, we had no air conditioning. All you kind of had was this like kind of broken down apartment. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how am I going to get hot water? And so I'm literally taking the pots and the pans out of my kitchen cabinet, and I'm going across the street to the public water fountain, and I'm filling it up. And then I come back to the apartment, and I put it on the stove, and I light the fire, and I heat up the water, and there was the shower.
Yes.
And so it's those experiences, I think you're absolutely right, that millennials are going through, and it's sort of inspiring this entrepreneurial spirit, where it's like, you know what? You can be on the go. We want you to have these experiences. We want you to go be who, you ever want to be in any part of the world.
Okay, and the only thing I'm going to say is that in this conversation, differently than the generation right before, who still, like, if you think about those that came out of the 60s and 70s, they conform, they ended up joining the system at most levels. The next generation was stuck in a lot of different recessions and had a lot of different attitudes of it, but by and large still bought into the same pattern. Your generation is not, and I still don't understand how you're going to pay your bills. Just saying.
I mean, that is absolutely a concern I have, because there are some people who I'm like, how are you affording to go across Europe like that? But, there was, I went to, my girlfriend Christina, she actually just left for Costa Rica for 7 months to go teach English.
Right.
And so it's like, millennials are getting really crafty in how they're, finding these abroad experiences. And, I'm sitting...
At that moment, though, all you're looking to do is be housed and fed for the next...
Yeah, I mean, she is getting paid. The program that she's doing, she is getting paid. So I know that can be an anomaly sometimes in those programs, but that's because that's how she justified it. She was like, how do I just leave, corporate life here in America and just, not have it be a detriment to my ultimate career.
I've worked. I wouldn't almost have a client base if it wasn't for the group of people who, in the 40 and early 50s, really said, I want to take off. And so very much I understand the impact. It's just coming earlier at a fuller force, like I have in the last 10 years of your generation coming in line economically where there's been a downturn in that appetite.
Right.
It seems to be escalating. The cheaper you can get it to go, the next way that you can sneak another little way to do it is of greater interest.
I mean, absolutely. Speaking to the Airbnb point, I mean, you can get rooms on there for like $10-20 a night. I've actually booked some of those rooms, and it's you can see the whole room. They have pictures, there's reviews, and a lot of it is millennials being like, hey, this is a really great spot if you're looking to just crash for a couple nights and see what you want to see. Because I think this is my philosophy, is that, you know what, that's fine right now. If I can pay that $20-30, just go see it, go do it, because I'd hate to miss out on an opportunity just because I was like, this might look a little seedy, it might be a little tough, but I just don't want to miss out on those experiences. And sometimes you get lucky. I will say I've gotten lucky where it's just another millennial who's like, you know what, I just want someone else. Yeah, I want someone else in the house, or you know what, hey, this is a new friend. Like it's a very like open-minded, free-spirited concept, which obviously has its pros and cons, but I'm happy to partake in that and the benefits it has to offer for millennials.
And I do not do the sharing. We do the ones that we get the whole apartments and the whole houses,
which
and
is nice.
There's nobody around it. But it is an incredibly convenient. It is a great way, and I will say that it does also on my end of the scale. I find that it does broaden how I experience people, how I experience what is acceptable, breaking down the boundaries of all the formality. I notice that having a huge impact, and I find that to be a great gift of that. I just will say that overall, like everything else we've talked about, this is another piece of that great social transition that we're going through. And at the end of the day, the ability to have experiences and to not be held back by the way things were or had to be is one of the greatest openings, because it will give you, I do have full faith that at some point you will want to eat on a consistent enough basis.
There'll be that point.
There will be that point.
Maybe not right now, but it'll come.
But honestly, this whole thing about the side hustle, I will be the first to tell you that in the last 5 years in particular, I have trained my clients to keep those great corporate jobs with all those benefits while they are simultaneously developing great interest through their values, through their purpose, where they can be gaining the income from what they truly love. So we are benefiting from what you are bringing us already. They are. I've got to, you just have to give credit where credit's due.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Yes. Do you hear that, millennials? Because I sure did.
There is, and I know that I have a deep appreciation, even with every time it questions something I believe, the way I work, the way I dress, the where I live, what this will look like, what that will look like. Yeah, I have that same human resistance.
Right.
And I love the energy. Like, I see the benefits that are coming up.
Right.
And I know that many within my peer circle are benefiting from the social changes. It is just, we are all in this great state of change. And is there anything else before we close that you would want to add to the conversation before I just sum things up?
I think it's just, I wanted to reiterate the awe and gratitude that, that comes with, positive emotions, and how traveling is just an incredible outlet for that. I think to end on a really great note was in Rome, when I was there, I'm a practicing Catholic, and there was a point, obviously, when I was there, that Pope Benedict decided to step down from
you were there then.
papacy. And going to Catholic school my whole life, when that news reached my ears, I was like, oh Lord, that means I'm going to be here
when they elect the new
pope. And I could just hear,
and not the young pope.
Right, yeah. I could hear Sister Mary Catherine in the back of my head, like, this is it. This is what we've trained for, Kaitlin. Like, this is your moment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. And so each time, they'd have the discussions, and they would do the gray or the white smoke. I was there in Vatican Square.
Wow.
It was an incredible moment, but I was there when Papa Francesco greeted the community for the first time. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking around at all of the people that are there, and they're from every country, every culture, creed, walk of life. And I could kind of understand what Papa Francesco was saying, and because it was half in Italian, and by that point I had actually kind of picked up on it.
Got a few phrases.
And I'm sitting there, and I heard the Argentinian girls who actually were next to me. They spoke English.
Yes.
They were freaking out, because they were like,
I have an Argentinian friend in
we
my
have
life.
an Argentinian pope. And he then goes, okay, now I heard, now it's time to pray. And they prayed the Our Father, and I could hear every single language around me praying Father. And I had never felt so far away but close to home in one moment. And I just thought, this was worth every ounce of trouble I put into this trip. And
that's fabulous.
It was just
That's fabulous.
an incredible experience.
Well, it does. I mean, that you did close with the unity. The symbols, and I think that's what your generation is bringing into the workforce, is the acceptance and wanting the connection. And positive psychology couldn't be more about connection. The only joke that I will say, I can never, whenever someone says that they're a practicing Catholic, I say, how long do you got to practice before you actually know how to do this?
Right. Sit, stand, kneel. Sit, stand, kneel.
What's this practice about? When do you get to know that you're a Catholic?
When have you completed ultimate Catholicism?
Yes. But what I will say is that the story of travel, your suggestion, and this suggestion came out because of last week's where I wrote a blog about that love is work. And I will say that development is work, but it's the kind of work that when you step back and you see the qualities of awe and the beauty and you see the interconnectivity, all the things that positive emotion and positive psychology say that when you take those in your life, you will actually in the moment be able to raise your own life up. And that's the goal. Whether you do it in your backyard because you're having a staycation, or whether or not you do it in a hostel in Rome.
Right.
It is the ability to really see how you can traverse through things and take away from it those things that really struck your interest, made your heart sing, and you, as each year goes, the impact of it is better and better. Absolutely. And that's what positive psychology hopes. And that is something that I want to close with a quote that actually came out of my reading today. When we are together, like the ability to speak as you did about the experiences, there wasn't a lot of catastrophizing. It was telling the stories of this is what happened. And so the language that you used, even when things would be incredibly scary, helps you really appreciate.
Absolutely.
And allow us to feel what that's like. So this is the quote. Language is very powerful. Language does not describe reality. Language creates the reality it describes. That's Desmond Tutu. So I urge you, think about travel. Play with it. Think about where you want to go and what you've learned. Put the language of inspiration to it when you do, and that will serve your success. Thank you.